Well-respected wife is caught in an affair with her ex-wife's husband is discovering incriminating messages on her phone. Husband, devastated and angry, decides to expose the affair to both families. Lydia sat in the quiet living room, the soft hum of the air conditioner blending with her thoughts. The house, a charming Victorian style with a well-manicured lawn, had been her pride for years. She gazed at the family portraits lining the mantelpiece, her eyes lingering on one taken during a happier time. The photos showed her and her husband, smiling, unaware of the storm that was about to hit their lives. Her husband, Michael, walked in, holding her phone in his hand. His usual calm demeanor was replaced with a stormy expression. "Lydia, we need to talk," he said, his voice tense. Lydia's heart sank. She had felt this moment looming, an inevitable consequence she had tried to push to the back of her mind. "What is it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Michael sat down opposite her, the phone still in his hand. "I saw the messages, Lydia. Between you and Augustine. Care to explain?" The room suddenly felt smaller, the walls closing in. Lydia's mind raced, searching for the right words, but none came. The affair with Augustine, her high school sweetheart, had started as an innocent reconnection over social media, but it had spiraled into something much more, something she hadn't planned. I don't know what to say," she stammered, her voice breaking. Michael's eyes, once filled with love and warmth, now bore into her with a cold, hurt look. "How long, Lydia? How long have you been seeing him?" The question echoed in the room, amplifying the gravity of the situation. "A few months," Lydia replied, her voice barely audible. She avoided his gaze, shame washing over her. Michael's hands clenched into fists. "A few months. And all this time, you've been lying to me, to our families. Do they know?" His voice rose, a mix of anger and disbelief. "No, they don't," Lydia said, tears welling up in her eyes. "Michael, I never meant for any of this to happen. I'm so sorry." "Sorry doesn't cut it, Lydia. You've betrayed our marriage, our vows." Michael stood up abruptly. "I need some air." As he left the room, Lydia felt the weight of her actions crushing her. She had jeopardized everything: her marriage, her family, her reputation. The love she had for Augustine, or what she thought was love, now seemed like a distant, foolish dream. The house was silent again, except for the sound of her own sobs. The portraits on the mantelpiece stared back at her, a stark reminder of the life she had put at risk. Lydia knew that this was just the beginning, the first unraveling thread of a tapestry she had woven over years. In her heart, she knew that things would never be the same again. The truth was out, and it was only a matter of time before the repercussions of her actions would ripple through her entire world. As she sat there, alone with her guilt and fear, Lydia braced herself for what was to come. This was the end of the life she knew, and the beginning of a tumultuous journey through the consequences of her betrayal. The following week was a blur of tension and silence in the household. Michael had barely spoken to Lydia since the confrontation, each passing day widening the chasm between them. The weight of the secret Lydia carried grew heavier, suffocating the life out of their once happy home. In a desperate attempt to find some closure, Michael decided to reveal Lydia's affair to their families. He planned a family dinner, inviting both his and Lydia's parents under the pretense of a casual get-together. Lydia, aware of his intentions, felt a knot of dread in her stomach as the day approached. As the families gathered in their dining room, the atmosphere was initially light, filled with laughter and the clinking of glasses. Lydia forced a smile, playing the part of the gracious hostess, while her heart raced with apprehension. After the main course, Michael stood up, his hands trembling slightly. "I have something important to discuss," he announced, his voice steady but cold. The room fell silent, all eyes turning towards him. Lydia's parents, seated across the table, exchanged confused glances. Michael's gaze met Lydia's for a brief moment before he spoke. "I've recently discovered that Lydia has been having an affair with her ex-boyfriend, Augustine." The reaction was immediate and varied. Lydia's mother gasped, covering her mouth with her hand, while her father's face turned a shade of red, his eyes flashing with anger. Michael's parents sat in stunned silence, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. Lydia felt as if the floor had opened beneath her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she looked around the table, meeting the hurt and confused faces of her loved ones. "It's true," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I'm so sorry." Her mother burst into tears, while her father slammed his fist on the table. "How could you do this to us, to Michael? After all he's done for you," he exclaimed, his voice filled with betrayal. Michael's mother reached out, placing a trembling hand on his arm. "Michael, we're so sorry. We had no idea." Michael shook his head, avoiding her touch. "I thought everyone deserved to know the truth," he said, his voice laced with bitterness. The dinner quickly disintegrated into a series of heated conversations. Lydia's affair became the focal point, each family member processing the revelation in their own way. Accusations were thrown, tears were shed, and the once warm family bond was now fractured. Lydia sat in silence, the magnitude of her actions crashing down on her. She had not only destroyed her marriage but had also torn apart the fabric of two families. The room echoed with the sounds of her betrayal, each word a piercing reminder of the pain she had caused. As the families left, the house returned to its eerie silence, but the damage was done. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. Lydia knew that the coming days would bring even more challenges as they all grappled with the fallout of her actions. This revelation was just the beginning of a long and painful journey for everyone involved. In the small town where Lydia and Michael lived, news traveled fast, and the scandal of Lydia's affair with Augustine was no exception. Within days, what was once a private matter turned into public fodder, as whispers and rumors circulated through the community. Lydia, once admired for her involvement in local charities and her role as a devoted wife and mother, now faced the judgmental stares and hushed whispers of her neighbors. Each trip outside her home became a gauntlet of shame and embarrassment. She could feel the eyes on her, the unspoken accusations and pitying looks that followed her wherever she went. Augustine, who had once been a beloved figure in the community during his high school years, was now the subject of scorn. His attempts to visit local spots were met with cold shoulders and outright hostility. The affair had not only tarnished Lydia's reputation but also cast a shadow over his own. At the local grocery store, Lydia overheard two women gossiping in the next aisle. "Can you believe Lydia and Augustine? And poor Michael, caught in the middle of it all," one said, her voice dripping with a mix of pity and disdain. Lydia hurriedly left the store, groceries half forgotten, her face burning with humiliation. The ride home felt longer than usual, each red light a reminder of the stop sign she had ignored in her moral judgment. Michael, too, was not immune to the community's reactions. At work, his colleagues tiptoed around the subject, their awkward attempts at normalcy only serving to deepen his sense of isolation. His once impeccable reputation as a trustworthy and upright member of the community was now overshadowed by the personal drama that unfolded in his home. Lydia's and Michael's social circle, once a source of joy and support, fractured under the strain of the scandal. Dinner invitations ceased, and the friendly waves from neighbors dwindled. Their friends were divided, some choosing sides, others retreating altogether to avoid the uncomfortable situation. The ripple effect of Lydia's affair was most evident in their children's lives. Their son, a high school sophomore, faced questions and taunts from his peers. Their daughter, in middle school, found herself suddenly isolated, her friends' parents forbidding them from visiting the house. As the weeks passed, the initial shockwave of the revelation began to settle into a new, uneasy normal. Lydia and Michael, once pillars of the community, now found themselves on the outskirts, navigating a world that viewed them through a lens of scandal and tragedy. Lydia lay awake at night, replaying the events over and over in her mind. The affair, which had seemed like an escape from her mundane life, had turned into a nightmare, affecting not just her and Michael, but everyone they knew. She realized the enormity of the damage her actions had caused, not just in her marriage but throughout the entire community. As Lydia and Michael grappled with their new reality, they both knew that the road ahead would be long and difficult. The echoes of the affair had spread far and wide, changing their lives and the lives of those around them in ways they had never imagined. The weeks following the revelation of Lydia's affair with Augustine felt like walking through a relentless storm. Lydia watched as her world, once full of love and laughter, crumbled around her. She struggled with a whirlwind of emotions: guilt for the pain she caused, grief for the life she lost, and a confusing mix of longing and regret over her relationship with Augustine. In the midst of this turmoil, Augustine reached out to her, his messages a mix of apologies and declarations of love. He spoke of starting anew, away from the judgmental eyes of their community. But for Lydia, the reality of their situation was far more complex than a mere escape plan. Lydia grappled with the consequences of her actions. The affair, once a secret escape, now felt like a heavy chain around her neck. She struggled to reconcile her feelings for Augustine with the devastation their relationship had caused. The man she once saw as a symbol of freedom and passion was now a reminder of her betrayal. Meanwhile, Michael was at his own crossroads. The revelation of the affair had shattered his trust, leaving him to question every moment of their marriage. The love he once felt for Lydia was now tainted with bitterness and hurt. He poured himself into his work, using it as a refuge from the chaos at home. The distance between Lydia and Michael grew with each passing day. Conversations were limited to necessities, their interactions strained and awkward. The house, once filled with warmth and laughter, now echoed with the silence of their broken relationship. Lydia's parents, deeply hurt by her actions, struggled with their own feelings of betrayal and embarrassment. They offered support, but their disappointment was evident in every conversation. Lydia felt their pain acutely, adding another layer of guilt to her already burdened conscience. In the midst of this, Lydia's son confronted her. "How could you do this to us, Mom?" he asked, his voice a mix of anger and confusion. His words cut through her heart, a painful reminder of the ripple effect her actions had on her family. Lydia knew she had to make a decision. Continuing her relationship with Augustine meant leaving behind her family, her community, and everything she had ever known. But staying meant facing the consequences of her actions and attempting to rebuild her life from the ruins. As she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, Lydia realized that there was no easy way out. Each path was fraught with pain and uncertainty. The affair had irrevocably changed her life, and now she had to face the reality of her choices. In another part of town, Augustine, too, faced his own crossroads. The affair had cost him more than he had anticipated. He longed for Lydia, but the weight of their actions and the impact on their families and community weighed heavily on him. He wondered if their love, born out of a betrayal, could survive the aftermath. As Lydia and Michael, and even Augustine, stood at their respective crossroads, they each had to confront the hard truths of their situation. The decisions they made would not only shape their futures but also the lives of those around them. The path forward was unclear, and each step was fraught with the potential for further pain and redemption. As autumn leaves began to blanket the streets of their small town, Lydia and Michael found themselves navigating through the aftermath of the storm that had upended their lives. The community's initial shock over Lydia's affair with Augustine had subsided into a reluctant acceptance, but the scars it left were deep and palpable. Lydia, once a vibrant presence in the community, now moved through her days with a quiet resignation. The hurtful whispers had lessened, but the looks of pity and judgment that occasionally met her eyes were a constant reminder of her indiscretion. She threw herself into volunteer work, seeking solace in helping others, hoping to find some redemption in selfless acts. Michael, on the other hand, was enveloped in a cocoon of introspection and legal proceedings. The divorce papers, once a threat looming over their marriage, had become a reality. He met with lawyers, sifted through shared assets, and faced the heart-wrenching task of co-parenting discussions. Despite the pain, he found a surprising resilience within himself, a strength born out of necessity and the desire to provide stability for their children. The children, in their own ways, grappled with the new family dynamics. Their son, now quieter and more introspective, found solace in his music, while their daughter clung to the routines that offered her a sense of normalcy in a world that had shifted beneath her feet. Lydia's and Michael's families, after the initial turmoil, rallied in support, albeit with a tinge of sadness that often hung in the air during family gatherings. Lydia's parents, still nursing their disappointment, offered her a shoulder to lean on, while Michael's parents became a steady presence in helping with the children. In this new normal, Lydia and Augustine's paths seldom crossed. Augustine had retreated, grappling with his own set of consequences. The affair had cost him not only his reputation but also a chance at a relationship he had once idealized. He remained a figure in the periphery of Lydia's life, a bittersweet reminder of a chapter that was closing. Lydia often found herself reflecting on the choices that led her to this point. The affair, once a thrilling escape, now felt like a distant, painful memory. She learned to embrace the solitude, using the time to introspect and understand the deeper reasons behind her actions. It was a journey of self-discovery, fraught with uncomfortable truths and hard-earned lessons. Michael, in parallel, began to rediscover his own identity, separate from his role as Lydia's husband. He reconnected with old friends, picked up hobbies he had long neglected, and slowly began to envision a life beyond the hurt and betrayal. As the story of Lydia, Michael, and Augustine drew to a close, the overarching theme was one of healing and resilience. The affair had been a catalyst for change, forcing each character to confront their flaws, their strengths, and their capacity for forgiveness. In the end, Lydia stood at the threshold of a new beginning. The road ahead was uncertain and undoubtedly challenging, but she stepped forward with a newfound understanding of herself and her place in the world. The autumn leaves crunched under her feet as she walked, a symbol of change in the passage of time, a reminder that even after the harshest of storms, life finds a way to move on, to heal, and to grow anew.